Continuing on the video series that we're looking at mineral insulated cable, and today I'm going to actually put the end on the cable. So in other words, I'm going to put the pot, I'm going to seal it up, etc. I'm doing this in front of a live audience. Hello? Yay! There's only 5 people in today. We're in the middle of COVID-19 at the minute, and it's likely that our college will be closed tomorrow. So I'm rapidly trying to put this video together to help my 5357 learners going for their city and guilds as part of their apprenticeship framework, or standards. It's probably standards now. So what we're going to do is we'll have a look at what's on the table first, and we'll bring the camera in super close. So hopefully you can see how I'm making the end off and sealing it to prevent, first of all, the ingress of moisture and obviously the conductors from touching each other. I just want to remind you that the seals that we're putting on are not fire resistive seals. They work up to about 80 degrees C. If you were to do a fire resistive seal, it looks completely different to this. It's the fire resistive cable. If the room was on fire, the cable within that room would be fire retardant. But if it went through to, say, the plastic bell or plastic break glass, they would melt in the fire. So they're not fire resistive. It's the cable system itself. So think about the building, part of the building that's on fire. Another room has an emergency lighting on it fed in a mineral insulated cable. That would remain on for the longest period of time. Once the fire entered that room, the plastic emergency light fitting would obviously melt and fall to the floor. I'd like to think the person in that room would have a really good idea it was on fire from the smoke and the raging heat that's in that room at that time. So let's bring the camera in and just have a look at what I've got, and then we'll bring it in super close and we'll start making off an end. So in front of us we've got some of the kit that we're going to use and some of the kit that we're not going to use on this end. So let's look at the stuff we are going to use. We're going to be using the rotary stripper in order to remove the outside copper, which is in this case going to be the CPC, because we've only got a 2-core mineral insulated cable at 1.5. We've got our knife that we're going to need, junior hacksaw. We're going to make sure this end is round before starting. We saw that in the previous video presentation. We've got our compound in order to seal the end of our cable to prevent the ingress of moisture. We're going to oversleeve the conductors with black sleeving initially and identify them blue and brown for line and neutral. We've got our shrouds, very similar fitting as we would when we did steel wire armoured and SY flex. We have to match our gland bodies to our cable. This will say on it, and it'll be impossible for you to see, it will say 2L 1.5, 2-core light gauge 1.5, which we mentioned before. And the body also has a compression olive in there. That compression olive can only be used once and squeezes against the outside copper in order to make a really brilliant electrical connection to what effectively will be the CPC. So that's our gland body. We've also got our pots, and again these need to match before. It will say on here, it'd be impossible to see, but it will say 2L 1.5 as before, and inside there is a self-tapping thread. Okay, so that will self-tap onto the cable, and we'll talk about how important it is to leave it in a forward rotation when we actually fit this pot on to the actual cable itself. And we'll also have a disc or cap. Okay, I tend to call these discs, and that would be inserted on top to keep the compound in place as well. So that's some of the stuff that we're going to use for this part of the demonstration. I'll bring the camera in super close and attempt to show you how to make off the end of a 2-core light gauge 1.5 mineral insulated cable. So for this part of the demonstration, I'm not overly concerned how much of the actual cable we make off on the end. It's the first one we've made off, but we're going to make a considerable effort to go down the cable. So I'm looking at about at least a span width down. So I need a span width down. So I don't want people terminating our cables at this length. I don't know whether we're terminating to a matchbox at some point, but that's not the case. So it's as if we're going into a socket outlet or a switch. The first thing we're going to do is need to put on the shroud. Okay, we're going to do exactly the same as we have done in previous video presentations, where we put it on in reverse and pull it down, and hopefully you can see an area there of which we've got to nip it off. Now it can be nipped off with a pair of side cutters or a knife. Okay, so let's just nip that off, like so, with a knife. And hopefully when we return it round in the correct position, it's quite tricky to get on because it'll be nice and tight. So let's see if we can get that on there. So it should be nice and tricky to get on. Okay, that means it's going to be super tight when I actually get it to go down the cable itself. So it's going on slowly but surely, and you can see now why I was so pleased about that being tricky is the fact it won't actually fall down the cable. Okay, so it's held into position. Often people cut too much off that and it slides off, and as we're practicing you'll find it on the floor, you'll pick it up, you'll slide it on, be back on the floor, you pick it up, and it's a vicious circle. So we're going to pull that one down into position like so, and we've just confirmed that we've actually got the end sawn off with a hacksaw. We did that off camera, and that was shown in presentation 1, where we used 3 different tools to strip the outside part of the cable. Before we get to the stripping process, we're going to have to remove the outside PVC. Remember, it could be white, could be red, and it can be orange, or it could be non-existent and be bare. We talked about all of those in the first presentation. Press reasonably hard with our knife as we go round, and then we'll strip off this part here, depending on how sharp my knife is. Okay, so strip that down to there, and hopefully that'll be able to pop into the bin underneath me, like so. Okay. So we want it fairly straight, so we've got a straightening tool. We'll perhaps show that in a different video presentation, how to keep these straight. But we've wound this off the drum, and that's reasonably straight. What we don't want it to do is great big kinks in it when using the rotary stripper. So we're ready to go. But the one thing we always tend to forget is that little bit of lubrication. So we're going to lubricate this up a little bit. So if we take our lubrication, just a little bit on your finger, and we're going to run it down here. Okay, we're going to run it down here. So I'm going to put my gland body on next. You can choose to or not to, it's up to you, but I'm going to put it on next. It can be a bit tricky because of where the actual compression olive sits. So let's undo the gland body. And let's hopefully it will slide on. These can be a little bit tricky to slide on. Slides on. Compression olive next, which you tend to drop. So get that on and we slide that down, followed by the actual body itself. Like so, if you're finding it difficult to get it on, just check the end has been sawn actually to a round shape. Sometimes you think it's round. If it's been crushed in any way, these can be difficult to get on. So that's approximately the amount we're going to strip back. We've obviously got the lubrication on. I'm going to attempt to use my rotary stripper. So let's just remind you what you do with that. So we put it on like so, and we have it facing the actual blade itself. So the cable is behind the blade. Okay, what people tend to do, and the learners that are sitting watching it here will say they did it. They had it where it was actually in front. So they had it so it was like that. So it was in front of the blade. You want it behind the blade. So if I come back a little bit, stick it in like so. And then this little vice, we want it just to clamp down, move freely. But obviously when I lift it forward, we don't expect it to fall off. So it will freely move, but not drop off. So just confirm that again. The cable is behind the actual blade itself. We're going to need a pair of pliers next. So if I nip to my toolbox, I should find I've got a pair of pliers. Okay, and what we did in the previous presentation is exactly the same. We're going to run the joy stripper down, and hopefully the bin below me will catch most of the actual debris itself. So let's move that out of the way because I don't want to get that full of debris. And what we're going to see now is the white compound, which is magnesium oxide. Okay, coming out of there. So here we go. So press a little bit firm, start it off, take our tail, and we're going to go like that, and exactly the same as we did before. So I'm doing it over a bin, I can fold it out of the way, we can go again. Like so, like so. We go again. Just try and keep your conductors as straight as you can. You might find at this stage you just want to trim it back. All done. Go again. Keep going, down we go. Should be relatively easy. You saw this in the previous video presentation, just more tricky for me because I'm trying to keep out of the way. Right, we're going to stop it at that point there. So come down to our pliers that are squared off, and we're going to just wring it off, hopefully. There we go, like so. And just remove that. The trick I've got is my conductors are super straight. That's the one thing that we tend not to do. So after volleying all the bottles on the floor, one of my audience members who's just had a little telling off camera, you might have found a dissolve or a slide through there. So we've actually now got our conductors. So reiterate to you that these are super straight. So I've kept them super straight. I'll perhaps show you a technique at some point on how to straighten them if you don't have them straight. So now we've got a limited amount of time in order to put the actual pot and seal on. I said to you before that there is a thread in here, a self-tapping thread that will tap its way onto here. So it will tap its way onto there. So I'm going to put this into position, and then I've got a choice of tools in what to get it on. Now I can start it off, perhaps getting it on nice and square, perhaps even start it off with my hand, like so. I can feel it, you can hear it squeaking onto there. Could take my pliers if I wanted to. in order to lock that round. So I could use a pair of pliers, or I could use a potting tool. So let's have a look at the potting tool next. So I've got a potting tool. I quite like using a pair of pliers to extend it down. I certainly can't do it with my hands now when I was using a pair of pliers, but just to show you the potting tool itself, effectively it's just a little clamp. There's a clamping section here, and we can only go into one way into the actual, onto the top of the pot itself. It goes onto the top of the pot, loosen it back off, and then what you end up doing is just clamping down onto the actual base of it there. So I've got it, and then you just use it to actually tighten it up. To make it easier, if you just fold it, obviously it gives you a little bit more leverage in order to tighten it on. Now, like so, I'm not going to use that now. I'm just going to still use my pair of pliers for the time being because it'll just be easier to show you. What we're trying to do is get it so the actual copper of the conductor just pops into the actual pot itself. It doesn't come all the way in, it just pops itself in there a little bit. So I am probably 2 or 3 turns away from being in the right position. Take my pliers and I check again. I look in. Care with your eyes when you start looking in here, don't poke it into your actual eyes itself, a little bit further. And I'm just going to go, and then until I'm happy. I like it a fraction short of being all the way in. So that's got really tight now. Let's have a little look in there. Yeah, I'm at 1/4 of a turn more. Okay, so we've got that now into position. So we're just about coming level with the threaded section of the actual pot itself. I like it a fraction shorter than going in rather than a fraction further than going in. We've now got to remove all the magnesium oxide that's in here as debris. Okay, so we just give it a little tap. Let's just give it a little tap with the pliers in order to empty that out. What we don't want to start doing, as we said before, is start blowing into the end here. So you might end up spitting in here and introducing moisture. Remember, moisture in the air could be being drawn into here because it's hygroscopic. So you've got a limited amount of time in order to seal this end. So let's look at sealing the end next. So let's take our actual disc or cap. I'll just move our conductors gently apart and then just drop those onto there. I haven't got my glasses on, so I'm using the force. Let's just do that. So let's move it into a better position so I can perhaps show you a little easier. So just move them apart. Put the actual cap on itself, like so. And what I want to do then is just bring it down into position. So I don't want to twist it now, so I need to look in there and keep them parallel with each other. So I'm going to bring it down into position, another little check in there, like so, and push it down so it's in the, what will be effectively its finishing position on top of the pot itself. If I twist it now, the conductors will twist together. If I push it to one side, it will touch the outer part of the cable, being the earth, and therefore providing the CPC for the actual circuit, it will give you a short to earth. So it's deadly important at this stage that you make sure when you look in there, they're not touching each other. So I want to see that they're not touching each other, and they're certainly not touching the outside either, because we'll either have a short circuit or a short to earth. So next what we're going to do is not pull that back any further. I've seen it in other video presentations where they pull it back miles now. I like to keep this as close as I can before I put my compound in from one side a little bit at a time, and I put that into the center of the V section. So I don't punch it in from this side, pushing the conductors together. I will push it in from the middle of the V. So I want it to go down there in the middle of the V. Let's look at that next. So I've got my compound now. It's really important, especially in our electrical workshop. We end up laying that on the metal bench, which has metal filings on it, and then we end up punching that actually into the end of the pot. Oh, and that will make it obviously a conductor. So be careful when you put it down that you actually reseal it, and make sure it's pretty malleable. Lots of colleges leave these for a year or so before they get them back out again, and if it's a little bit too firm, it can be really tricky to make off the pot. With clean hands as well, just open it up a little bit, and as I said before, I want to send it through the center of that V a tiny bit at a time. So I'm just going to punch a little bit in at a time. So I'm filling up from the center of that V. So I'm trying to fill the middle section up. A little bit at a time. People tend to go mad and start putting too much in. So we're trying to overfill it from one side. So by overfilling it from this side, you punch the air out from the other side, stopping an air pocket in there when you seal it, which eventually over time can break down. So a little bit at a time. So just going to keep going with that, a little bit at a time. It's going to take a while for you to do it. Just keep going a little bit at a time. So I'm just going to pull back from the camera now and see what I'm doing. Remember, I've got two problems. Can't see what I'm doing because I'm not wearing my glasses, and I'm showing the camera and not myself what's happening. So I'm just going to pull back. So what I'm trying to show you there is that we're actually filling it in from one side. Ideally, it's coming down the center of the V, and we'll have some excess on one side as we punch it through on the other side. So we start being a little firmer now when we push it in. So I'll bring it back round again. It can be a little bit firmer as I'm just pushing it in a little bit at a time. Little bit at a time. And we continue this process on until we've overfilled the pot from this side and filled it from the other side. Notice I've still got loads of it left. You should be able to make at least 3 ends out of one of these, at least 3. And we're going to overfill it. So I'm just going to pull back again and see where we are. Okay then, so we've continued to fill it up. So we've filled it up, so hopefully if I can spin it round, you can see that we're overly filled it up. Okay, so we've filled from both sides. We've kept the cap in the same position. We don't want to twist it now as we put it down. We want to put it straight down on top of the conductors, and hopefully some excess compound will leak out of the sides. So we're going to pull that straight down on top using our fingers, like so. No twisting now, because obviously you'll just twist the conductors together inside. Take your finger, take off some of the excess. That's no good, so don't put it back on the stick. Just move it out of the way. So we're there, and just make sure it sits comfortably on top of the actual pot itself. So I'm just checking it just sits on there. And then we're going to use our crimping tool, in other words, to force down this cap and pin it in 3 positions onto the actual pot itself. Things that would be very careful of is that you don't start twisting this, okay? We ended on a forward stroke, so when we tightened it on the pot, we ended on a forward stroke because the thread ends there. If we go on too far and back, you end up having a thread that makes this loose. That is rock solid on there, and that's another mistake that learners can make when they're doing it. They go too many threads on and half a thread back, the pot becomes loose, causes you an issue. So we've set the cap or the disc directly on top of the actual pot itself. Time to get the crimping tool out. So next, the crimping tool, we've got 3 spikes on it. Those 3 spikes are going to make 3 dents on the actual pot to hold this cap into place. Looks like so. I've wound it back fully, and we're going to insert it in like, let's get that into there. So my conductors go through the center part of the vessel, and now we clamp on. Now this is again important. In a minute, I'm going to clamp onto the pot, which means I can move the pot left or right. In other words, start twisting it again. If I twist it again with the conductors held in place, it will twist the conductors, causing you a problem. So this is a bit, again, once you've clamped onto here, you haven't got to twist the pot again. So let's wind it down gently into position, making sure it sits in the right place. So down we go, all the way down, and then we're going to look at not spinning the cable in any way, because obviously we'll start twisting the conductors. So down it goes. Right, I've got it into a reasonably firm position, like so. So we're clamped into position. So now the tendency is to start moving the brass part of this around, which ends up twisting the pot. We don't want to do that. Hold that dead still. Do only the clamp. So the clamp's coming down, the pot is not moving. And hopefully what happens is a load of excess compound leaks out the side. I love it when it shoots up the actual plastic teats effectively of it. So that's as far as I can get it down. Super tight. We come back out again. Let's see where we've leaked to. So the compound, if there's too much compound in there, it will leak out the sides. There we go there. Okay, so let's see what we've got here. A little bit of excess leakage there. I've removed it. I do like it sometimes. It sometimes shoots up the actual spouts there. That's a really nice feeling when that happens. So it's lovely. It's sat on there brilliantly. It's dead in. It's dead flat. Probably difficult to see on the actual camera. It's actually put 3 little dinks in it to hold actually on. Those are those 3 spiked marks. So maybe you can just see that one there, a small little indent in 3 positions that holds that cap into position. It's fully down, so I can't move that cap around. When students are doing, they don't get it on enough, they'll be able to move the cap around. So that's the end sealed up. It requires us to put on some sleeving and identify the conductors during testing. But we've got to confirm that that end hasn't gone down by using an insulation resistance tester next. So let's test this first end before we even concentrate on doing the second end. So at this stage, it requires you to go all the way down to where the other end of the cable is. Remember, you'll be done your first fix, you'll be installed your cable, secured it to the fabric of the building, and then you're looking at second fix, making the ends off. Okay, and you can see that this end has been cut with a pair of pliers or side cutters. So before you test it, you'll need to use a hacksaw and cut this end off. So I'm going to do that off camera. I'm going to go back to a circular end and we'll have a look at that. So now my end has been cut with a hacksaw. It's worth looking in there, check there's no copper spikes going in and touching the conductors or each other, that it's nice and clean. Perhaps we don't want to spend too much time rubbing our finger over the top of it, but we just need to visually confirm that the conductors aren't touching each other or the outside. So then what we do is we're back at our original end, and we can now perform an insulation resistance test between the conductors and between the conductors together to the actual, effectively the earth of the system. So in other words, a CPC provided by the sheath. If we get a clear reading here, that means that this end is correct and you can walk and make the other end off. If for some reason there's an issue, I'd always check the other end first, but the likelihood is you've got a problem in your pot, and at this stage you're going to need to take it back off, come down a little bit further with the same technique for stripping, and put a brand new pot, brand new compound and brand new disc or cap onto the actual conductors themselves. So let's get the insulation resistance tester out and see if Gaz has got it right in front of a live studio audience that also volleyed all their bottles of drink on the floor. So the insulation resistance tester is set onto the megaohm scale. Okay, and we're going to test this conductor. You can test it at 251. I'm always at 500, so I'm going to stick with that. I'm sure if there's a reason to do it otherwise, somebody will comment below for me. So I'm going to go, first of all, between my live conductors. Okay, so making sure they don't touch each other. I haven't insulated them yet. So let's see if we can get a reading acceptable. And that reading has gone off the scale, so greater than 999 megaohm, so that's clear. So let's test between now our live conductors to what will be our protective conductor. So we go between there and our live conductors, and we'll press and hold the test instrument, and you can see we've got a reading climbing in megaohms. That's a fantastically high reading. We've just snipped this cable off a drum. There is a little bit of a chance that this end here has got a little bit of moisture in, so I could cut that back further to see if it was a little bit of ingress of moisture in this end from last week. So this has just been laying around, and to see if we can get that up to a better reading. Remembering that 600-700 megaohms is a fantastic reading still with this end to go. So let's cut this end off to see if we can prove a point, to see if there was a little bit of moisture tracking across this end, and retest again between the live conductors to earth. So I've cut the end off again, I've taken a little bit more off it, so it's prove a really good point. We go again, and we can now see it's cleared. Okay, I wasn't bothered about it being 700 megaohms, knowing full well that when I made the other end off it'd be fine. It's a considerably massive number and not an issue to me, but we've just taken a little bit more off the other end being the one that's obviously been left for a while. Got to be careful now because it can have the capacitive effect, mineral insulated cable, so you have to discharge it. So in order to do that, the longer the runs, the more charge it will hold, is that you short the conductors together like they were, and then you take the conductors and you short them back to earth with obviously not touching them. So I touch that to earth, I touch that also down to here. Sometimes you see it spark. Okay, we haven't there, but it can hold a charge in there, so be very careful. Just show you a trick to try and straighten the conductors as well. So if you had a conductor you needed to straighten out, if you hold on nice and tightly to it and you just pull it, okay, it will straighten out those conductors. So hold it on the tip and just pull it, and we can get those conductors considerably straighter than they were before. Just requires us now to actually over sleeve these with the black sleeving. So we've got some here, and then we'll identify them when we get to the other end made off. You'd identify one as a line and one as a neutral. Probably not going to do that in this video demonstration, but just show you how you would do that. At one end of the cable, okay, you would actually short this down to earth. You go to the other end and you measure between one conductor to the sheath, which is providing the CPC. When you found that conductor, you could identify it as, say, the neutral or the line, whichever you chose. The other one wouldn't be down to effectively down to earth. Then of course you can identify that as the other conductor. It's a simple case of putting the black sleeving on, and then for us identifying it with blue or brown. So blue or brown sleeving in order to identify the conductors on top of that, but I would put that one on first. So that's pretty much a quick whistle-stop tour live in front of my audience of how to make off one end. You repeat the process for the other end. I recommend after you've done your first end, you speak to your instructor, so your instructor can give you some feedback, make sure it's tested out correctly, etc. Then we can work on the second end. Getting the correct length and measurement will be some stuff that we'll cover also in the workshop. Pot's nice and tight as well, and we're ready now in order to go into our enclosure once we've made off the other end at the required length. So almost my last video shot, one day before effectively my students leave because of COVID-19. I hope this video will help them in the future, and if you've watched and it's helped you, then that's good.